Okay, here we go into Job 2. No, I did not change my clothes. I'm just going to sit at the counter and rip off all three of these. So, deal with it. Job 2, the joys of Job. Okay, now remember we've talked about Job isn't just drama happening and trauma happening. There's joys that we can find in it. So let's just jump into Job 2. On another day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present himself before him. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And Satan answered, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." And then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no man on earth like him. He's blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any cause." Okay, now the Lord's kind of making some comments and throwing a couple other little daggers in there. And then Satan says, "Skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his own life, but now stretch out your hand, strike his flesh and bones. He will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well, then he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crowns of his head. And then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. Suffering, and we think of suffering. None of us think of this. So where he sat would have been on the outskirts of town. Arabic towns, there was a place where rubbish and dung and stuff were thrown. And this dung is heaped upon what they call the mezbela, I can't say it, of the villages. It's not mixed with straw. It's a warm, dry land it's not needed for litter. And it comes mostly from solid hood animals, as flocks and oxen are left overnight in grazing places, and it's carried in baskets in a dry state before the village and burned once a month. And that burning of it, you have these ashes. So it wasn't necessarily a pleasant place to be, but because of his sores and because he had something that was definitely not normal, he was not able to be in town. He was sitting there scraping himself because of the boils, pus. I don't know, I did some research on it and the pictures were really ugly. But this is where he finds himself sitting. And often when we think about it, the devil destroys what holds us up. So what held Job up? Well, Job held up the fact that he believed who God was. And so the devil was looking to destroy that. And the devil was looking to destroy Job, but he was really looking to destroy Job's outlook on who God is and what God was all about. And the devil knows that in the end, it's just stuff. So it's just, nothing's left in the end. It's just man. The stuff leaves. So you think about it. People leave, stuff leaves, health leaves, comfort leaves. We're just left with ourselves. And it's a stark reminder that, like in the first chapter, naked came I into the world, naked will I return. When you're getting ready to die, it's just you and God. The stuff you've done, all the accolades of life, they're gone. And Satan knew that. And at the end, it was just man. So he was seeking to destroy Job as a man because Job was all he had left. Everything else was gone. And then Satan says something about skin for skin. A man will give all he has to save his own life. So now we think about that. When else in the Bible do we find people saying things to save a reputation, to be safe, to not be made fun of or criticized? I think the first thing I think of was Abraham, when he kind of sold his wife out and afraid that they would kill him because she was so wonderful, instead of saying, "She's my sister and my wife." No, he's just going to say, "She's my sister." And then, of course, we have David. David sold out Uriah, tried to get Uriah to come home and take the heat for David sleeping with Bathsheba and her being pregnant. He tried to get Uriah home, so shift the look, and Uriah wouldn't have anything to do with it, so he ended up killing him. And then we see Peter. Peter denied Christ to save his skin. So it's really interesting. Job's not the first one, and Job won't be the last. The devil expects us to lapse in our integrity. I mean, he expects it. And that's where we're in a fight with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit helps us so that we don't have a lapse in our integrity. But it's more important, I think, that Job strengthened the grip he already had. He already had a grip. We strengthen the grip we have. Our faith walk is stronger, but we have to have a faith walk to make stronger. Job had a grip on God, and he strengthened his grip on God rather than, well, he questioned it, but he strengthened it. Now we get to verse 9. And his wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." Okay, now the Septuagint and the Masoretic, they're two different texts. Septuagint, say that real fast, is a Greek text. And the Masoretic is the most Jews and Protestants. It's the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible does not have Job's wife saying this. The Greek Bible does. Greeks were into drama. They were more into the poetry, into the drama. So did they just add it for impact? We don't know. But if you think about it, we can't throw Job's wife under the bus because remember, she lost everything too, and she's watching her husband die. And there's lots of different options for this commentary. Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die? And Job says something to her that I think is really important. He says, "You're talking like a foolish woman." He doesn't call her a foolish woman, but he says, "You're talking like one. Shall we not accept good from God and not trouble?" So in other words, he's saying God has given us everything we've got. Everything we've had has been from God. Should we not just expect everything we want? We should not have expectations of I'm only going to get good. I'm not going to have anything go wrong. You sometimes have a day where it seems like you start out the day and everything's great, and by the end of the day you're going, okay, that was a 50-50. But actually that's more norm than anything, because a lot of our day ends up being at the hands of other people's decisions. And so if we maintain that God is going to bless us and we will take whatever happens with whoever we're dealing with, it's going to be a blessing either way, whether it's what we think is good or what we think is bad. But I want you to think about this. Job did not say quite a few things. He did not say to his wife, "Get over it." He did not say, "You are foolish." He did not say, "God will make this all work for the good." He did not say, "This is God's plan." He did not say, "The darkest night is..." He didn't say a lot of the things that we hear people say to try to make us feel better. Her faith would have been shaken. I'm sure Job's faith was shaken. But he chose not to say certain things. How often should we be Job and just not say certain things? His response to her in a very traumatic time was very kind and loving and affirming and encouraging, instead of criticizing her. You shouldn't say that, blah, blah. A lot of times we are the Job's wives in situations, and we need to be the Job to gently rebuke, but turn everything back to God. So then we have the three wise men coming up. And this is in 11 through 13. Now, when Job's three friends heard of the adversity that had come upon him, each one came from his own place. So they're coming from different places, and they're all getting together, and they made an appointment to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they raised their eyes from afar, they did not recognize him. They lifted their voices and wept, and each tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head toward heaven. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw his grief was great. Number one, I'm just going to make some off-the-wall commentaries. It's always good to go with a friend. It's always good to go with people and surround friends who are struggling. Go with two or three. One night in the middle of the night, I don't know how middle of the night was, but we had a friend in the hospital, and so another friend and I went down, and we changed into our goofy clothes at the chapel in St. Mary's, and then we waltzed into the room acting really silly. It was after visiting hours, but normal people were home and in bed, and we just came to encourage and have fun. So sometimes just being with other people to go and encourage is huge, because it's fun, number one. But also, we do better in community. We do a lot better in community. But when they came, they looked and they didn't recognize him. I remember walking into the hospital when I went to see my friend the last time, and I walked into the room, and if I would not have known that was her room, I'd have never known that was her. Cancer had changed her so much from the couple months that I had not been there. And they had a couple options. Number one, they could have said, "Oh, you look terrible." No, sometimes we say the wrong thing. And so instead of saying anything, just don't say anything. They chose to lift their voices. They chose to weep. They chose to do what you did when you mourned back in that time. They tore their robes, sprinkled dust on their head, and then they sat down with him and grieved. We don't grieve very well. We want to fix it, and we want to give a good idea, and it makes everybody feel better. And there's sometimes you just need to be there and hush. Spend the time and mourn. Now, they did 7 days, and for some of the commentaries, it's alluding to the 7 days of mourning that was appropriate back in that time. But it also says, for they saw his grief was great. Sometimes we really need to just be quiet and watch and observe someone else's grief. Just watch. And the Holy Spirit can do things, but so often we talk, we try to solve, we don't listen. And they just took the time to sit and grieve. Now, boils. So there's two things, boils and carbuncles, which is kind of interesting. A carbuncle is a deep abscess. Hezekiah had these deep abscesses where his life actually was in the balance because of it, because they were so infected into his body. But Job's boils were superficial. They would not have resulted in his death. But the boils of the Egypt's plague, that would have been very, very painful. The Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant and placed it before their idol Dagon, and the Lord afflicted them with boils. Naaman had leprosy, which was boil-like sores on their skins. King Hezekiah. In Matthew 8, the leper probably had boil-like conditions on his body, which Jesus healed. Boils are gross. And so when you think about being with somebody with something gross, sometimes it's not fun. But their desire and their need to be there. And they were putting themselves in a place where they probably would have been considered then unclean because of whatever he was scraping. So it's just interesting when we look back. When your faith has been shaken, where did you find your stability? Now, we talked about when our faith is shaken, what don't we want people to say? Maybe the better thing is when our faith is shaken, what do we want people to say? We want them to remind us that we serve a God who will and can and is taking care of us. But who do we turn to? Where do we find our stability? For a lot of us, it's our friends. It's the people we look up to. It's the idols in the faith. It's our Hebrews 11 faith chapter people. But it's also important to understand that pain weakens our resistance and makes everything seem worse than it is. So pain weakens our resistance. And if you've ever had uncontrolled pain, everything looks bad. And so when we're dealing with people that have pain that cannot be controlled, we have to realize that they may say things that they don't necessarily wouldn't say under other circumstances. They say them because they're in pain. How do we escape pain? Well, Job praised God. His focus was on God. So our second chapter maybe brings us more to focus on what we do say, what we shouldn't say, where our focus is as far as do we use our words to encourage or do we use our words to accuse? When our faith has been shaken, where does our trust and our stability come from? So, end of chapter 2.